On today's episode, I'll get into a Blackhawks injury update as well as a preview of the NCAA tournament.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick, right off the jump, do me a favor, please go and hit that like button, hop in the comment section down below, and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Even if you're someone who regularly tunes in through an audio platform, if you like what you're hearing on a daily basis, please make sure to jump on over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button for me. Again, it's 100% free, will not cost you anything, and helps me out in a massive way in growing the show. Lastly, got to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, which is Game Time. Make sure to go and download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $20 off with your first purchase. All right, happy Tuesday, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Hope everyone's Tuesday is off to a good start for yours truly. Definitely starting to feel better compared to yesterday. Not 100%, I would say, but trending in the right direction, starting to take those baby steps, which is definitely a good sign. But to open things up on the show here today, some injury updates coming from Fifth Third Arena as the Blackhawks return to practice. And they were actually without Jason Dickinson, Alec Martinez, and Colton Dach in Sunday's 7-4 win over the Philadelphia Flyers to finally put an end to their 7-game losing skid, with the Blackhawks having a back-to-back over the weekend, meaning that would give them an off day yesterday. We didn't get much of an update on either of these three players during the weekend, but I knew that would come with the team returning to practice. That's exactly what we got here this afternoon. Starting first with the bad news, unfortunately, Jason Dickinson, who I believe actually suffered his injury stepping up and coming to the aid of his teammate in Alec Martinez after he suffered a tough hit into the boards from St. Louis Blues forward Jake Neighbors on Saturday. Dickinson comes to his aid, fights Neighbors, and winds up hurting his wrist, I believe. It hasn't officially been confirmed, but after that fight, we didn't see Dickinson on the bench for the rest of the second period, did not take another shift in that game, so I'm guessing he got injured in the fight. So a little bit of a double whammy there for the Blackhawks. Martinez injured on the hit, and I'll have an update on Alec here in just a second. And then Dickinson injures his wrist in the fight, and sadly, that's going to cost him his season, as Sorensen told the media that Dickinson is going to miss the final 11 games of the 2024-2025 campaign. 29-year-old center finishes the year with just 7 goals and 9 assists for only 16 points in 59 games after tallying career highs all across the board last year, including 22 goals and 13 assists for 35 points. I think we all knew it was going to be hard for Jason Dickinson to replicate that type of season, right? But I don't think any of us expected for him to come back down to earth this hard in the offensive category. Now, he still is one of the most underappreciated defensive centers in all of hockey. I firmly believe that, and I think us Blackhawks fans don't even truly appreciate all the good work that Jason Dickinson does going up against the opposing team's top line night in and night out, because he's doing it for one of the worst teams in all of hockey. But make no mistake about it, it was a pretty lousy offensive season from Dickinson. I mean, really didn't create all that many opportunities for himself or his teammates, did not generate nearly as many shots on goal this season, but hopefully he takes this time off now to get himself right next season and make a larger contribution for this Blackhawks team offensively while still doing the same thing on the defensive side of the game. He's under contract for $4.25 million through the end of next season. Next, we get to Alec Martinez, who's been diagnosed with an upper body injury per usual hockey injury diagnosis. We don't really know what's wrong with Martinez, but Sorensen told the media that he's day-to-day at this point in time, and with the Blackhawks being in the situation they're in, Alec Martinez, 38 years old, with all the mileage that he has on his tires. I mean, tons and tons of Stanley Cup experience. Don't necessarily expect him to be rushing back from this injury here late in the season. If I had to guess, he'll probably return either on Sunday against the Utah Hockey Club or for the Blackhawks' first game in the month of April. But I got to give Alec Martinez a lot of credit. He was banged up early on in the season a couple of times, and I was pretty concerned considering, he was brought in to bring some stability to the defensive core as a 38-year-old, again, with all the mileage that he has on his tires. I was worried that's kind of how the whole season was going to go, and he was only going to wind up playing like 20 or 30 games. Now, I actually don't have the numbers in front of me, and I should. I apologize for that. Martinez has probably played in like 50 games or something at this point in time. Still, of course, not a full season's worth, but he's been much healthier consistently in the second half of the season, and I give him a lot of credit for contributing more on the offensive side of things than I anticipated he would at this stage of his career. Sounds like we haven't seen the last of Martinez, though, in a Blackhawk sweater. Seems like the expectation is for him to suit up for the club again this season. And last, that takes us to Colton Dach, who got hurt against the Los Angeles Kings last Saturday. We were waiting to hear the diagnosis on Dach. No official confirmation as far as how long he's going to be out. All Sorensen gave us is that he's going to miss some more time. So to me, I don't even really know if I'd still be playing Colton Dach this late in the season unless he's well over 100%. And kind of based on this comment from Anders Sorensen, I'm not all that convinced that Colton Dach is going to be 100% for those last couple of games of the season. So we'll see if we see Colton Dach again. I believe there's a good chance of that because they probably would have just ruled him out for the season right here, right now, if that was the case. But I wouldn't be rushing Colton Dach back at this point, especially because he's a kid who's been through so many injuries already in his young career for the Seattle Thunderbirds of the WHL in his final junior season. He got hurt at the World Juniors as well, got hurt at Blackhawks development camp a couple of seasons ago, suffered a concussion down in Rockford. I think he had a shoulder injury in Rockford last season as well. So the kid's been through a lot. I wouldn't hate shutting him down for the remainder of the season if it's anything that could potentially linger whatsoever. Again, doesn't seem like that's the case based on the comments, but I'm sure we'll get a more clear update on Colton Dach's status here within the next week. Whenever that comes, I'll make sure to talk about it right here on Locked On Blackhawks. But before I jump into segment 2, as far as what do these injuries mean for the Blackhawks in their final 11 games? Well, first off, with Jason Dickinson out, his final game came on Saturday against the Blues. He was playing on the Blackhawks top line with Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar, which I didn't like whatsoever. With Dickinson out, I wish it would have happened in a different manner, but that does now put Ryan Donato back on the Blackhawks top line. That was the top line at practice here this morning. I would leave that alone for the remainder of the season. But that now has Nick Foligno bumped up from the third line center spot to the second line center spot in between Teuvo Teravainen and Ilya Mikheyev. And then with Colton Dach out of the lineup, that also means Philip Kurashev is going to get some more opportunities here late in the season to very likely at least finish off his Blackhawks tenure on a high note. Joe Veleno was bumped up to the third line center spot for the Blackhawks. He's sticking with Tyler Bertuzzi at the right wing. Philip Kurashev was playing left wing on the third line at practice this morning. I'd expect that to be the third line when the Blackhawks return to action tomorrow night against the Devils. Defensively, without Alec Martinez, it just means kids are going to get more opportunities. The ones who are already regularly in the lineup, expect them to get more minutes. And I'd anticipate Louis Crevier getting in the lineup a little bit more here down the stretch as well, considering the Blackhawks have been utilizing Alec Martinez at the right-handed defenseman spot with only Artem Levshinov and Connor Murphy being the other two right-handed defensemen on the roster. Louis Crevier, I'd expect him to get some reps over these next couple of games on the third line. Could also, I know this isn't going to really make any Blackhawks fan happy, could see TJ Brody a couple of more times before his Blackhawks tenure likely comes to an end in the offseason when the organization tries to part ways with him in that contract. But yeah, tough slew of injury updates for the Chicago Blackhawks. Tough that Jason Dickinson has his season come to a close. More opportunities for some kids, though, in these final 11 contests. But coming up in just a minute here, Blackhawks fans, I'll get into a full preview of the NCAA championship and all the Blackhawks prospects that are taking part. Real quick, though, I got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is now giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Because right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks that you can use on everything, from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's going to cut down the nets. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's almost always something exciting to bet on. And again, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So what are you waiting for? Make sure to go and check out FanDuel.com right now to get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. I also got to talk to you all real quick about Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Well, then go and crack into a great source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts, with each 1 ounce serving having 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily nutritional value. Plus, they're packed with fiber to help keep you feeling fuller longer. And who doesn't love a good pistachio? I know I certainly do. I could sit there literally cracking and eating them all day long. And if you're someone who's always on the go, whether you're running between meetings or dropping off the kids at school, Wonderful Pistachios are always the snack that works as hard as you do. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch right now by visiting wonderfulpistachios.com. Again, that's Wonderful Pistachios to check it out today and learn more. Segment 2, 6 Chicago Blackhawks prospects will officially be taking part in the NCAA tournament this year. And with the 16-team bracket being released on Sunday, I figured I'd talk about the matchups and specifically which Blackhawks prospect I believe has the best chance of winning a national championship this year, as well as all of the first round matchups. Starting things off, Ryan Greene and BU going to be taking on Ohio State on Thursday at 1 p.m. Central Time. Make sure to put a little reminder in your calendars. A good opportunity to see these high-end NCAA prospects playing in the most meaningful action of the entire season. Ryan Greene and BU going to kick it off on Thursday against Ohio State at 1 p.m. Central Time. Greene, of course, was a second-round pick for the Blackhawks back in 2022, spent the last 3 years playing for the BU Terriers, finished his junior season in which he was the co-captain of the squad with 33 points, 13 goals, and 20 assists in 36 games, 3 points shy of what he had in 40 games last year. Maybe not necessarily the regular season in terms of productivity that I would have liked to see out of Ryan Greene. However, I still think he's done a really good job being a veteran upperclassman leader of this squad while playing in all high leverage situations, being the team's top line center. Super excited to see what he has in store for what's very likely going to be his last bit of action in college hockey before signing his entry-level contract. Then we got also on Thursday, Oliver Moore, Sam Rinzel, and the Minnesota Golden Gophers, who got to have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder considering how they went out in the Big Ten tournament, getting upset by Notre Dame. They're going to be in action at 7:30 p.m. Central Time on Thursday night, taking on UMass. And Oliver Moore, I've talked about it a couple of times on the show recently, finished his sophomore season, the sophomore regular season, as of course his sophomore season hasn't officially come to a close, but finished the regular season on a really strong note, just like he did in his freshman season. Played his best hockey during Big Ten regular season play, wound up finishing the season with 32 points, 12 goals, and 20 assists in 37 games played. Very reliable two-way center iceman, good at the face-off dot. Maybe doesn't have the offensive upside or the offensive productivity that we've wanted to see whole in his first 2 years. But again, I do think he's gotten better as the season has gone on. I quite honestly think Oliver Moore would benefit from one more year in college hockey being the head honcho of this Golden Gopher squad. We'll see what winds up happening, though. Can't say the same for Sam Rinzel. I expect Rinzel to sign his entry-level contract whenever the season comes to a close. Former 25th overall pick in the 2022 NHL Draft, was named the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, finished the season with 31 points, 10 goals, and 21 assists in 39 games. We'll see if the Golden Gophers can get back starting on Thursday night against UMass. Then we got a matchup between a couple of Chicago Blackhawks prospects. 1 second, Blackhawks fans. Trying to not have those dry throat coughing fits here on today's episode. If I can avoid those, that would be wonderful. But Aidan Thompson in Denver on Friday at 4:30 p.m. Central Time are going to be taking on John Mustard, Taige Harding, in the Providence Friars. Oh boy, is that going to be an interesting tilt on Friday afternoon for Aidan Thompson. What a phenomenal junior season for him in the Denver Pioneers. 2022 third-round pick tallied 51 points, 19 goals, and 32 assists in 41 games this year, tied for fourth in the NCAA in points. What I will say, though, is Thompson is a lot older than a majority of his competition, as he played in the USHL before making the leap to college hockey and got drafted as an overager by the Blackhawks, but you'd still rather have him putting up these points than not, regardless of his age. But Denver, obviously, trying to repeat as national champions. David Carl, his final run with the Pioneers. We'll see if they can get it done. Starts on Friday against the Friars. As far as how things go for John Mustard and Taige Harding, Mustard, he's been utilized on the top line at times this year for the Friars. He's been down on the third line. Maybe didn't have the freshman season that guys like Oliver Moore had, or like we saw Sasha Boisvert have with North Dakota, but a very strong freshman season for John Mustard for being a third-round pick. Wound up tallying 20 points, 7 goals, and 13 assists in 36 games in his first NCAA season as an 18-year-old going up against grown men in a league that's gotten deeper and deeper over the last half decade to a decade. Very strong first college hockey season out of John Mustard. For Taige Harding, he's a fascinating case, Blackhawks fans. Third-round pick back in 2021 under Kyle Davidson at that point in time. So under Stan Bowman, at that point in time, was not a GMKD draft pick. Finished his regular season with 14 points, 2 goals, and 12 assists in 36 games. Never really going to be known for the offensive side of things, though. He's a huge presence on the back end. 6'6", 6'7", over 200 pounds as a left-handed defenseman. And listen, I love having more of those guys in the prospect pool because seemingly all the teams that have success in the Stanley Cups or go on deep Stanley Cup runs, they got size and physicality on the back end. Blackhawks sure got that in their prospect pool with Rinzel, who's got good size, Lev Shinov's got good size, Vlasic, Louis Crevier, Ethan Del Mastro. I mean, even Kevin Korchinski's over 6 foot. Then you got Taige Harding as well. I don't know necessarily where he fits in, but I wouldn't be shocked to see him sign an AHL deal with the Rockford Ice Hogs. I don't think he's going to sign an ELC with the Blackhawks, but I do think they want to give him an opportunity in this organization. I don't think they want to quit on Taige Harding. He's just got too much of an intriguing frame to completely quit on him, but excited to see him in action along with John Mustard facing off against the defending national champions, Aidan Thompson and the Denver Pioneers. Again, that game starts at 4:30 p.m. Central Time on Friday. Oliver Moore, Sam Rinzel in Minnesota play UMass on Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Central Time. First NCAA tournament game involving a Blackhawks prospect is Ryan Greene and BU taking on Ohio State on Thursday at 1 p.m. Central Time. One that I wanted to get into, I'll go through the rest of these first-round matchups, Blackhawks fans, before getting into the Hobie Baker Award finalists. Number 1, Boston College. And make sure to stick with me for segment 3, Blackhawks fans, because I'll be talking about a very intriguing member of the Boston College Eagles during segment 3. But number 1, Boston College faces Bentley in the opening round of the tournament, with the winner of that game playing the winner of Providence versus Denver, likely getting BC unless they get upset by Bentley. Then we see Western Michigan also facing Minnesota State. Incredible goaltender for Minnesota State. If you haven't seen what he's been up to this year, I'll talk about him in just a second. The winner of that game plays the winner of Minnesota versus UMass. Then we got Maine versus Penn State, Quinnipiac versus UConn. UConn obviously knocked out Providence, right? Yeah, they knocked out Providence in the Hockey East tournament. I don't know why I'm getting confused about that. I want to make sure that's 100% right, but I believe that is 100% right. Regardless, the winner of those two games will play in the next round. Michigan State is also playing Cornell, with the winner of that game playing the winner of BU versus Ohio State. As far as which Blackhawks prospect do I believe has the best chance of winning a national championship, it's tough, Blackhawks fans. I want to say Minnesota, but they're really not going in with good vibes. But maybe that gives them, like I mentioned, a large chip on their shoulder potentially. I think they're the most talented team with a Blackhawks prospect on it. Obviously, Denver has good experience, lots of talent, a coach that's been there and done that. So I'll probably say Minnesota or Denver. I don't think BU has the full squad to go and win a national championship this year. Providence, I don't really think has the team either. I would guess Minnesota or Denver, but let me know what you think in the comment section down below, Blackhawks fans. Which Blackhawks prospect do you think has the best chance of winning a national championship this year? Real quick, before I get into segment 3, did want to get into the Hobey Baker Award finalists that were announced last week. Unfortunately, none of the Blackhawks NCAA players that were in the mix wound up being among the 10 finalists here, although it's not really that shocking. I think Sam Rinzel had a chance, and I did mention at one point in the fall that if Sam Rinzel won the Hobey Baker, I would get a Rinzel lip tat. Looks like that's no longer in the cards, but the finalists for the Hobey Baker: Zeev Buium from Denver leading the back end for the Pioneers. Jack Devine for the Denver Pioneers as well, led the NCAA in points this year. I talked with Armando Velez, the host of Locked On Panthers, when I was recently down in Orlando. One of the few high-end prospects that the Panthers still possess in their organization. I know they're super excited about him being a 7th-round pick, I believe it was. Aiden Fink out of Penn State. They'll be taking on Maine in the opening round of the tournament. He's 3rd in the NCAA in points. Mac Godowski, who I admittedly am not familiar with whatsoever, out of Army West Point. Isaac Howard, the Selly, out of Michigan State, 26 goals on the season among the NCAA leaders, and also T4 in points. Ryan Leonard for Boston College led the NCAA in goals this year with 29. Ayrton Martino of Clarkson tied for 4th in points. Maybe this is a non-ball knowing moment for me, but I'm not all that familiar with him. Liam McLinsky out of College of Holy Cross, 2nd in the NCAA in points. Jimmy Snugerud of Minnesota, 8th in the NCAA in points. And then last but certainly not least, the man I was referencing a moment ago is Minnesota State is going to be playing Western Michigan in the opening round. Alex Tracy, Minnesota State's goalie. I think he had a 1.41 goals against average this season. He's actually from Chicago. Jack Devine, I believe, is actually from Glencoe as well. So 2 Chicago boys in the mix for the Hobey Baker this year. Absolutely love to see that. And Alex Tracy and Jack Devine. As far as who I think is going to come away with it, I think Ryan Leonard is certainly among the finalists, or the most likely finalists to win the award. I think Alex Tracy, depending, I guess, what he does in the tournament truly will not impact whether or not he wins. I think Alex Tracy is in the mix considering what Minnesota State has done this year and some goaltender numbers that we never see at any level anywhere. And then Jimmy Snugerud, I think, was a huge part of Minnesota this year. Those will be the 3 guys that I'm kind of looking at. Jack Devine, I think, definitely has to be in the mix. But there is everything to note. I'm about to cough, Blackhawks fans. I apologize. I'll edit this out of the audio version. Still fighting through it. Apologies. But there is everything I have before the NCAA tournament begins on Thursday. Again, the first game involving a Blackhawks prospect is Ryan Greene and BU taking on Ohio State at 1 p.m. Central Time on Thursday. Coming up in just a moment, Blackhawks fans, before I close out today's episode, speaking of college hockey players, I'll get into a brief little update on 2025 NHL Draft prospect James Hagens. Real quick, though, I do got to talk to you all first about Game Time. There's nothing like watching basketball live. The energy of the crowd, the sound of the sneakers on the hardwood, and maybe even a celebrity sighting courtside. And if you want to catch a game in person, Game Time makes getting tickets easier than ever. And with Game Time's new feature, Game Time Picks. They filter out the fluff and show you only the best deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time scrolling through thousands of tickets. And Game Time Picks even highlights super deals, giving you the best bang for your buck. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and using our code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps for $20 off on your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL, LOCKEDON in all caps for $20 off with your first purchase. What time is it? It's game time. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just want to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. For your second listen, make sure to go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter down the home stretch of the regular season with the local coverage you love from Locked On. And you can find Locked On NHL right now on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, James Hagens, one of the top choices for the 2025 NHL Draft, has now had his freshman regular season come to a close with Boston College. Obviously, he still has some games to play with BC in the NCAA tournament, which I advise all of us Blackhawks fans to be tuning into as someone who we could potentially be selecting, whether you think he's the ideal prospect you want or not. We don't know how the draft order is going to go. We don't know how the ping pong balls are going to bounce. There's a chance we wind up with James Hagens. So I think it would be very smart for all of us Blackhawks fans to tune into not only BC's game throughout the tournament, but all of the games throughout the NCAA tournament to get a good look at some of these kids, some of these Blackhawks prospects as well, but a kid who is highly regarded as one of the top picks in this year's class in James Hagens. So I wanted to get into a quick little update on Hagens' status, kind of some of the vibes around him from hockey sources as he's going into his home stretch of games during his freshman season. And now that the regular season has officially wrapped up. So for the season, James Hagens, who turned 18 back in November, I do want to be sure to mention that as he's a little bit older for this year's draft class, particularly compared to guys like Connor Bedard and Macklin Celebrini, who were super young at the top of their draft classes. James Hagens, who was entering this class as the guy who I firmly believed was going to wind up being the number 1 overall pick. I think a lot of people thought that was going to be the way things were going to pan out as well. But he was a kid who was 18 for the majority of his freshman season. That couldn't be said about Macklin Celebrini, the top overall pick the year prior. But for his freshman season, Hagens wound up tallying 35 points, only 10 goals, along with 25 assists in 35 games as a freshman. Now look, a point per game as an 18-year-old against grown men on one of the top teams in college hockey is certainly nothing to bat an eye at. But what I do want to say is, in comparison to some of the top college hockey players that we've seen go high in NHL drafts the last couple of years, it is a little bit of a disappointing season for James Hagens, just in comparison to some of the big names who have been selected high these last few seasons. For reference, what Macklin Celebrini did last year. And I don't think anyone was really expecting James Hagens to quite explode the way that Macklin Celebrini did. But again, Celebrini had 64 points, 32 goals, and 32 assists in 38 games as a freshman. And again, he was only 17 years old. Adam Fantilli, who was the third overall pick, in the 2023 NHL draft, but highly regarded as a top overall selection in most other years. He had 65 points, 30 goals, and 35 assists in 36 games as a freshman. And even Will Smith, now there was a ton of talent alongside him still, but he went 4th overall in 2023. And also, this one you have to put an asterisk next to because that draft class was just so absolutely loaded. Will Smith is a number 1 or number 2 overall pick basically any other year. But he had 71 points, 25 goals, and 46 assists in 41 games. Even Logan Cooley, who was the 3rd overall pick in 2022, he had 60 points in 39 games as a freshman, 22 goals, 38 assists. He had what James Hagens did this year was a very similar freshman season to Kent Johnson, who went 5th in 2021. So I think that gives you a little bit of perspective in terms of what you're expected to do when you're a high-level prospect going into your first college season. It's not a massive disappointment that James Hagens was a point per game guy, but it's just in reference to some of the other players, the numbers weren't quite as sturdy. And with James Hagens being a 5'10" center, I do think certainly the buzz around him going into this draft class is not as high as it was kind of a year ago, and like we all thought it was going to be. However, there are still certainly things to be intrigued about with James Hagens. The fact that he does look like he's capable of playing center at the next level. You do have some concerns about his size, but he makes, at least in comparison to Connor Bedard, which I don't think is very fair, much more of a two-way center is James Hagens. He's a better skater, very elusive on the move. He's kind of hard to bump and knock off of his route. Very good playmaking ability. The goal scoring was probably the thing that was the most disappointing this year, seeing this kid only tally 10 goals in 35 games. But again, I do still think there's reasons to be intrigued by James Hagens because of the way that he plays the game, because of the center ice ability, and because, again, he's only 18 years old and there's lots of runway for him to grow with the way that he skates and the playmaking ability that he possesses. But it wasn't a, knock it out of the park, grand slam, walk-off home run type of freshman campaign out of Hagens. So I'm very curious to see how he's going to fare in these final games of his freshman campaign, the final games that he's going to play before entering the NHL draft. I think they're very meaningful in determining, again, just kind of the vibe that he's going to have going into this year's draft and could ultimately decide where he shakes up in the draft order. So that's kind of the update I wanted to get into on James Hagens. I feel like I just talked down about James a whole lot. That's really not what I wanted to do, but I did want to provide kind of the sense of realism around this kid right now, as there were some very lofty expectations for him going into his first collegiate season. Not to say he didn't necessarily meet those, but again, it wasn't the grand slam walk-off home run that I think a lot of us thought we were going to get out of James Hagens as an 18-year-old for BC, but we'll see how he fares in the NCAA tournament. Again, the most meaningful games of the season. If he goes out and has some of his best games, things can turn around in a hurry. That's the fun of the NCAA tournament. That's the fun of March Blackhawks fans. Lots of reasons to be tuning into the NCAA tournament. In addition to the 6 Blackhawks prospects that are going to be taking part, we got a guy like James Hagens who knows, could wind up being the selection for the Chicago Blackhawks in the 2025 NHL Draft, playing for Boston College as well. But that's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you enjoyed what you watched here today. And make sure to follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way you can get the show on the go, to or from work, during your lunch break, whatever it may be. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me on X at Jack Bushman 2. Make sure to show some love to the show's page at _Blackhawks, as that account is now creeping up on 2,000 followers. Until tomorrow's episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Tuesdays. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.